delighted to say we've been joined in the studio by Roger Allam, star of The Hippopotamus, which is out next week. All right, Roger, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you.
And I realised when you came in that when I see you and when I hear you, I still think of you as the voice of death.
Ah, death. Yes.
Ah, death.
That's always a good role.
Which is, of course, one of your fine narrating roles from a few years back. But anyways, it's very nice to see you. And The Hippopotamus is out next week. Tell us about The Hippopotamus. Why is it called The Hippopotamus? And is that you anyway?
Yes, it is my character. It's called The Hippopotamus because that's the name of Stephen Fry's novel, which the film is based on. And Ted Wallace, the character I play, is kind of this lumbering, failed poet, sacked drama critic, drunk. That's at the beginning of the play. Yes. Who gets sent to solve a mystery in a country house.
Can I just, sorry, from the critic's point of view, just because the film opens with you as a very dissolute, a drunken critic at a theatrical production at which you are voicing your disapproval of the production. Everyone turns around and says, stop it. And you say, it's not me that should be shushed. And the whole thing. And because watching this as a critic, and Stephen Fry has, of course, said in the past, he once said, who on earth would be a critic? Imagine turning up at the gates of heaven and St. Peter asks you what you did, and you said, I spent my life criticising other people's works. And so I thought, okay, fine, here we go. So just to clear the air, having played the drunken critic at the beginning, how do you feel about criticism and that particular critic that you're playing?
That particular critic in that particular situation, which was an absolutely execrable and pretentious production of Titus Andronicus, I'm feeling utter sympathy with him. And I've often felt like doing the same thing myself, but my sympathy with my fellow actors would never allow me to do so.
And how do you feel about critics in general? Again, just to clear the air.
Well, I feel about critics in general, if they're good, if they like what they're criticising. I mean, for instance, I always feel about you that you love film. And so, but I can think of certain critics, certainly in the theatre, which has been more my background, who I think, why on earth are you a theatre critic when you
you don't like theatre?
When you just obviously just hate it.
Is that actually true? Do you think that they came to over a period of time they've become sad and bitter?
I mean, I guess it's different to being, because I don't know in what circumstances, in what number of circumstances you go to a film that you're going to write a review of. You might, I don't know, do you go to special screenings?
Yeah, so I mean, I see 10 films a week, and you see Monday and Tuesday you do 5 and 5. But I do think that you should go in with, and I mean, not everybody would agree that I do, but you attempt to go in with an open mind, hoping for the best. And the point is, if you ever got to the point that you didn't love film, stop doing it. Because if you don't generally love the medium, why would you want to? And that's the whole thing. At the beginning of the Hippopotamus, your character is embittered.
He is,
drunk, to be honest,
and drunk. Yes, and of course he doesn't particularly love the theatre. He's ended up being a theatre critic because he's a failed poet. Yeah. So he's not at his sunniest at the beginning.
Turning whiskey into journalism.
Yes,
which is a particularly fine line. So Ted Wallace. And we mentioned that this novel came out in 1994, so this has been around for quite a long time. Did Stephen Fry turn up on the set? Does he? Because this hasn't been turned into a movie before, so This is an exciting moment. Does he come along? Does he talk to you about it? How does that work?
No, he didn't really. He'd given it over to John Jenks and his team.
He's the director.
John Jenks, the director. And John had read the novel before he went to film school and had always wanted to make it into a film. So it's been around for him for about a decade, which I suppose is about average for an independent film.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Stephen sort of gave it his benevolence, but not his sort of control or his, he wasn't there a lot. I met him for lunch and sort of to discuss it. Before, and he was on set once, I think, And
then the primary conceit of the story is that your embittered, drunken character is presented with the possibility that something miraculous might have happened, and he is then sent off to a house.
Swafford Hall,
where he is not told what he's looking for, but is told that he will know it when he finds it.
That's right. He is presented with this opportunity by a kind of niece, a goddaughter, I suppose, who has been diagnosed with leukemia, but is convinced that she had a miraculous cure at Swafford Hall. And his excuse to go there is because he has a godson there who he can go and visit. So that's his sort of in.
Although she is also paying him to go, and since the work is dry, he does actually
large sum of money.
Large sum of money.
Very, very rich.
Yeah.
And the audience thinks as one, wow, fancy having Ted Wallace as a godfather, praying for your eternal soul.
Yeah. Yes, you'd be in a rather agnostic place, I think, if that was the case.
I think so. We're going to play you a clip before we go any further into the film. There's a clip featuring Roger's character Ted Wallace with Russell Tovey as Rupert Keynes, who kind of owns the paper, or he's the editor of the paper that you work for.
We need to put up a strong front, but first we have to check you in for some rehab.
I can hold my drink.
Ted, I'm trying to help you. This all just needs management.
Needs management, the war cry of the brown-trousered.
You know I venerate your work.
I know no such thing. I know you've been told by people cleverer than you that I'm a feather in your greasy cap. I know my writing for you makes you feel successful. I know, you know, I could walk into any job and spark grateful tears from the illiterate in charge. I also know you took culture because you couldn't get the news desk. You would censure me. You're the one bringing down the tone with your mealy-mouthed mummery and your prostration before the gods of public approval. You sexually craven provincial nerd. Why don't you take your freckled ass on a sabbatical and let a real man edit the paper?
I think that gets to the heart of Ted Wallace. In fact, there was only one little birdsong intrusion there. We've been using birdsong recently for anything that is inappropriate.
I was wondering how you were going to deal with that.
Yeah, but actually, that's about the longest sequence that you get without too much profanity.
Imaginative swearing,
Yeah,
yes.
that's right. But I think people will get a handle from that, Roger, how glorious your lines are. And, you know, almost every sentence, every paragraph that you get is something to be relished.
Well, you know, Stephen has this fantastic kind of facility with language, and you read the novel and you think, well, this is a fantastic part. But of course, what you have to attempt to do is to make it seem as natural as possible that someone can speak in these sentences of almost Jamesian length, you know, without interruption and very fluently. And so that was always my task. But it was a great pleasure, and I was very much assisted by having played Falstaff a few years previously at Shakespeare's Globe, another famous drunk who can talk endlessly.
You did seem to be really enjoying the bile and vitriol of that speech. I mean, it does sound like something you're really sinking your teeth into.
Well, what can I say? Yes. That's true.
And then, is it possible to describe the tone of the rest of the piece? Because obviously, on one level, it is a film about miracles, and we all know where Stephen Fry stands on the subject of divinity.
Oh, I think, yeah, we sort of start off thinking, well, you know, you these might sound very plausible, but we know Stephen Fry has written it, and as one of the greatest exponents of exposing hokum, we kind of guess that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. So, how would you describe the tone of the rest of the film in that case?
Well, it has a variety of tone, I suppose, because it is.
That's kind of what I'm throwing it to you to do, rather
Thank
than
you very
doing
much. It is, you know, it is funny. We hope it's funny and a comedy, but at the same time, it is also has some of the conventions of a country house mystery, and there is this, as you say, this whole thing of debunking the miraculous. But I think in the film, somewhat more than the novel, Ted comes round to a view in the end that he sort of acts, although he manages to debunk the miraculous and expose it for what it is, he also manages to embrace the somewhat miraculous nature of creativity and of being alive, I suppose.
And are there any sections in it? I mean, I know that the central character is not Stephen Fry. I do understand that. But obviously, because he's speaking in Stephen Fry's acting. There are certain moments when you think, I can really hear Stephen Fry saying that. And I wondered whether there are moments in your performance in which you felt that is a little bit Stephen Fry.
Well, you certainly feel that all the time because of that facility with language and thing. But I mean, I did resist trying to be Stephen. I mean, and when I spoke to Stephen, he was talking about, we were both talking about models for it, about old Soho types like, I don't know, Geoffrey Bernard and George Melly.
Yeah.
But Stephen mentioned particularly Simon Gray. And you just start thinking about those people from a different era.
And there is a staggering amount of whiskey drunk in the film. We were mentioning earlier on another film which had a lot of whiskey. But I don't think there's a scene in the film for the first half an hour when you haven't got a glass of whiskey in your hand.
Yes, that's true. He does have, shall we say, a problem.
But journalism has very much cleaned up since then, and nobody does that anymore.
Absolutely not. I'm amazed that the BBC Club is still open.
Was it a fun picture to be on, Roger? Because we have an ongoing conversation about movies that are fun to film. But I wonder if actually you as a cast, and there's some of the other members of the cast who are old friends of yours, whether actually it was just enormous fun to be filming in a place like that with a script like this.
Yes, it was fun. It was great fun, and it was lovely to be with some old friends and also to meet new people. And it was a beautiful place to film, but it was hard work and as well. And I never knew. I had no idea how it would turn out, really. And I somewhat despaired when the decision was made to put voiceover in, because I thought, oh, that means we've not got something right. But now when I see it, I think, actually, no, it does work, and it does help get Stephen's tone of voice and Ted's tone of voice. And when you think of the people who've used voiceover, I don't know, Scorsese's done all right, hasn't he?
Well, and you've done voiceover yourself.
Indeed, I have. But yeah.
But you think sometimes it's used when the story itself is not properly explained on screen.
I guess so. Yeah, that was my fear. Yeah, that was my fear, that we'd be doing stuff in voiceover that we couldn't film somehow. Then I think you're with lots of things at that time about constraints of length, constraints of budget, all kinds of constraints that made voiceover a very sensible thing to do. And I do think it works stylistically in the film.
When you said it was hard work, what do you mean? It's always hard work. Of course, it's hard work. We're making a film. Or was it surprisingly hard work?
Well, I'd had a bit of a year. I'd done another independent film at the beginning of the year. I'd just done 4 episodes of Endeavour, with not a day between any of those things. And so I did get a bit tired, because I was in a lot of the time. And John insisted on making me do things like fall into lakes and stuff like that.
That's right.
Be wet, and so it was quite physically taxing.
I have mentioned this quote a couple of times, but Sean Penn came on the show a few years ago, and he had just managed to land Mark Rylance in a movie, who at the time sort of didn't do. But this is before his.
Oh, right.
Before when he did do movies, but at the time he didn't. And Sean Penn was absolutely of the opinion that theatre actors are the best people to work with in a movie context, and they behave differently and they work better and they have a slightly different work ethic. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but he preferred to work with theatre actors if he could.
Gosh.
Do you think there's any truth in that at all?
Well, I suppose, for someone like Mark or me, we kind of, we turn up and learn the lines. I mean, I remember doing a film for the Wachowskis, which I thought was going to usher me into Hollywood villaindom, but unfortunately tanked and lost more money, I believe, than only 8
This
other
is Jupiter.
films. No, this is Speed Racer.
Oh, you were in Speed Racer, Roger. Yeah. I had completely forgotten you were in Speed Racer.
And I had a couple of scenes with enormous long speeches. Yeah. So I thought, well, I better learn those, and I just better get them down. So I learnt them, and then I was in a room, with Susan Sarandon and John Goodman and Emil Hirsch and various other people, and they sort of said, well, how do you want to do this? You want to break it up? And I said, no, let's just go for it and do one. And so, you know, I got through it all and it was okay. And they just sort of went, yes, at the end. And I just thought, well, that's...
Isn't that what you do?
You know, but so I suppose, but I don't know. I don't know. I guess I really don't know about that, what Sean Penn was saying. I don't know. But I guess if you've worked in the theatre, you've got, and you're very experienced, God knows, like Mark is, you have got a certain sort of basic craft that can serve you in good stead in certain circumstances.
Can I ask you a Cannes question? Because I just asked you, you know, have you been to Cannes? Because obviously, Wind That Shakes the Barley was here, and I was wondering if you were there. And you said that you've never been.
No, I've never been. No, never been asked.
But is it simply never been asked, or is it just really? I mean, believe me, I'm with you. I mean, I'm not going to Cannes.
Ted Wallace wouldn't go to Cannes.
I know. I wish.
Well, he would. There'd be free drink.
I wish I could say it was out of some great moral high ground. It's just that I've never been asked. I'd go out of curiosity, morbid or otherwise, you know.
Morbid, yes. I mean, it is. It's a very, very strange experience. It has very little to do with filmmaking, and an awful lot to do with people, you know, flouncing up and down the Croisette.
But you must have been quite a lot, you know.
I did 9 years, and I was increasingly terrible every
time.
year.
Every time you spoke to Mark while he was there, we did some shows when I would be at the golf, say, covering some sport, and Mark would be at Cannes, and that was the time when you did the famously long review of Pirates of the Caribbean, the second film, which we'll be talking about more next week because we'll get back to pirates. And part of Mark's mindset for that movie was undoubtedly due to the fact that he was at Cannes and loathed and despised in a way that Ted Wallace would have loathed and despised everything and everybody that he had met from start
very
to
loudly.
Finish.
So there's a little bit of Ted in you as well.
Sadly, there probably is. Yeah, exactly. Now, I know Roger was very keen on hearing listeners' questions.
Listeners' questions.
Oh, yes.
That's right. That's exactly what he said. Chris from Barnard Castle. Hello, Simon and Mark. Can you give my favourite actor, Roger, a hearty hug? No. And tell him thank you for all his work, but also thank him very much for the joyful cabin pressure on Radio 4. Cabin doors to automatic, brackets, in joke.
Well, that's not a question. That's just someone saying something very nice. I love that.
Very good. Okay. So if you can just keep them as positive, life-affirming statements, we'll be fine.
The same kind of thing, but now couched in a question. This is from Kevin in Oldham. Can you ask Roger if there is any chance of Cabin Pressure, the movie, happening? He is so good in the role of First Officer Douglas Richardson.
Oh, that's very kind. I don't think so, really. I mean, Cabin Pressure was such a pleasure to do and so easy for someone like me because it was, you know, a whole series took 3 Sundays, that's all. 6 episodes took 3 Sundays to record, whereas for the writer who was also in it, John Finnemore, I mean, he spent nights and nights up at 4 a.m. gazing into the writer's void, you know. So for him, it was kind of, it became very difficult, I think. I don't think there is, because although there was discussion of doing a television version of it, that there's something so radio about the humour, about the kind of reveals in it, that putting the visual element in might destroy, you know. But, you know, I imagine if Benedict was keen on doing it, it might have a chance of happening.
And Bennett Gillespie actually says, is the lemon in play? Which is funny for Cabin Pressure. Is radio drama and radio comedy just a joy, particularly if you've got a script like you had and it's light on the recording, but when you work hard at the theatre, when you work hard at making a movie, when you go into a sound studio and record a play or record some comedy like that, I would imagine the weight must lift from your shoulders.
Well, yes, I mean, it's very different. That was a gloriously, beautifully written comedy that we did in front of a live audience, and so it had that element as well, which was a great pleasure. But doing, I mean, something very serious like, say, Laughter in the Dark, which I remember doing a version of, it's wonderful to do because you can have fantastic scripts and fantastic parts, but you only have to do them for 3 or 4 days, you know. So you get the chance to do something that's exciting and engaging, but it doesn't take up a lot of your life.
Mark Thompson, not film related, but I saw Roger in Pravda at Birmingham Rep. He was great and dealt with a heckler who I know quite brilliantly.
Can you remember?
No idea. No, I can't remember at all.
Drunk at the time?
Me?
Yeah, that was a
Certainly
joke.
not.
No, I understand. It was,
But you don't remember getting heckled?
No, not on that occasion. No.
Do you remember doing Pravda?
I do remember doing Pravda, yes, at Chichester and at Birmingham.
Because I was just interested, because that would be a sublime moment, as we've seen you heckle in your new movie. You stand up and heckle the play.
yeah. No,
and if someone stood up and heckled you, it would be a brave person.
Well, as I was playing a monstrous character, I should imagine I just sort of shouted at him in a monstrous way. But I honestly can't
I'm
remember.
really
what I
impressed
did.
that you don't remember. I'm impressed that somebody saw you deal with a heckle and you don't remember. Believe me, if I dealt with a heckle, the only time I've been canned off stage in Bradford. So, I would remember dealing with a heckler well. But you just carry on.
Yes, it obviously wasn't something awful. Although I do remember many, many years ago when I did a bit of stand-up comedy. I was at somewhere like the Woolwich Tramshed in a sea of drunk people, and I had this very slow downbeat intro to my song, and there was a large drunk bearded person standing up and swaying in the crowd, shouting words that I can't repeat on a family programme, otherwise I'd be tweeted. And something came into my brain, which was something I'd read in Punch years before, which is he had so much charm he could make Liberace appear brusque. And that came to my rescue.
Roger, we're out of time. The Hippopotamus opens a week on Sunday. We appreciate you coming in, Roger. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.